Chapter 1. The Duchess Takes a Look Ahead. Smiler surfaced slowly from a deep and dream-filled sleep. In the few moments before he opened his eyes, Smiler had no idea where he was or what had happened to him. His arms and legs ached. There was a crick in his back and a heavy weight on his lap. He opened his eyes. Resting on his lap was a large Siamese cat with a torn left ear. Smiler found that he was sitting in the front of a small car. Through the windscreen he could see the slope of a heather-covered hill and a clump of red-berried rowan trees. Beside the road ran a small stream, swirling and cascading over sun-bathed grey boulders and flanked by tall bracken growths. A pair of hooded crows flew out of the trees, and a yellow wagtail dipped and bowed on one of the stream boulders. A shadow fell across the window at his side, and the man's voice said cheerfully, "Wakey, wakey, go dip your face in the burn, lad, and then there's a mug of coffee waiting." Standing by the door was a large-faced, middle-aged man wearing a battered straw boater with a coloured ribbon around it. He had a black, thickly waxed sergeant major's moustache that curled into sharp points at each end. His dark eyes held a lazy, good-humoured twinkle. Memory coming slowly back to him, Smiler said politely, "Good morning, Mr. Jago." "And a good morning to you, Samuel Miles." The man lifted the cat, which Smiler now remembered was called Scampy, from his lap, and went on, "Down to the burn with you." Stiffly, Smiler made his way to the stream, splashed water over his head and face, and then wiped himself on his handkerchief. The water was ice cold. It brought the colour back to his cheeks and drove away the fuzziness of the uncomfortable night. He realised now that he must have slept while Mr. Jago went on driving through the night. Mr. Jago, he thought, looked as fresh as a daisy, and Mr. Jimmy Jago, Smiler acknowledged, had been good to him, for he'd picked him up late on the Fort William road and had helped him to get well away from trouble. Going back to the car, Smiler said to himself, for Smiler was a great one for talking to himself in times of trouble or doubt, he said, "You are lucky, Samuel M., that Mr. Jago came along." Although most people called him Smiler, he didn't himself much care for the name. He preferred Samuel Miles, or better still, Samuel M., which was what his father called him. At the thought of his father, a shadow passed across Smiler's thoughts. At the back of the car, which was a very old four-seater tourer, were set out 3 small wooden boxes. On one of them was a camping stove roaring gently to itself, while a saucepan of coffee simmered on top of it. Mr. Jago, opening a tin of sardines for Scampy, looked up and said, "Sit yourself down, lad, and take some coffee. No food for us. We'll get breakfast later. But animals is different. If Scampy don't get his regularly, then he'll howl his head off until he does." Smiler sat on his box, cradling a mug of hot coffee in his hands, and Mr. Jago sat on his box with his mug. Scampy crouched on the grass and ate his sardines from a small saucer. Scampy was far too great an aristocrat to eat anything straight from the can. Mr. Jago sat there, eyeing Smiler, and saw nothing to turn him from an opinion he'd formed very soon after he'd picked him up the previous night. The lad was in trouble, and more than that, the lad was down in the dumps. Jimmy Jago had no difficulty in recognising this, because he'd often been in trouble himself, though not so often down in the dumps. He was a good-looking, healthy, strong boy, somewhere around 16 years old, Jimmy guessed. Yes, a likely-looking lad, tallish, fair-haired, well-built, with a friendly, heavily freckled, squarish face, and he had a pair of angelic blue eyes which, when he smiled, made him look as though butter wouldn't melt in his mouth. Not that he, Mr. Jago, was going to be fooled by that. Boys were boys, and trouble clung to them like their shadows. And so it should be, because that was what in the end made men of them, good, bad, or indifferent.